you to our panelists. Um, so I'm Yasmin Taib, and I serve as MPower Change Action Fund's legislative and political director, and I'll moderate today's discussion. Before we begin, I see that a lot of folks are already putting in the chat where you're calling in from, or joining us from. If you haven't done so, we encourage you to do so. And if you have any questions for any of our panelists, please use the specific Q&A function to jot your questions in there as opposed to the regular webinar chat. So for those, and I apologize about my voice, I'm a bit under the weather. For those that are unfamiliar with our organization, Empower Change, we're the largest digital Muslim org in the U.S. with more than 500,000 members nationwide fighting for racial, social, and economic justice and a progressive and human rights centered foreign policy. Empower Action's organizing team and their GOTV efforts in New York City in particular reached around 149,000 New Yorkers this election season to ensure that we were expanding the electorate by registering and turning out the vote. Today's discussion will give an overview of Zohran's historic victory for New York City mayor, overcoming millions and millions of dollars in attack ads and a constant stream of vile Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian hate. Some of the local and national groups that supported Zohran, mobilized for him, and raised money for him are leading our discussion today. We'll talk through some of the strategies employed on the ground that resulted in Zohran's decisive victory over Andrew Cuomo in the primary and general election, and we'll discuss how to build from Zohran's landmark victory and how it will shape the 2026 midterms, races all across the country, and our broader fight for peace and justice. So I want to turn it now over to our colleague, Fahad Ahmed. Fahad is the director of Drumbeats. Fahad also currently serves as the executive director of Drum, Daisy's Rising Up and Moving of New York City, where he has served in various capacities since 2000. Drum has mobilized and built the leadership of thousands of low-income South Asian immigrants to lead social and policy change that impacts their own lives, from immigrant rights to education reform, civil rights, and workers' justice. Drumbeats was one of the very first groups to endorse Zohran when he was polling at less than 1%. Fahad will discuss what they were able to accomplish, specifically in the South Asian community, which was as a result, and he'll talk through this, as a result of years of organizing he's been doing in the community, and how specifically Zohran's campaign resonated in the South Asian community in ways the community was activated. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Fahad.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fahad, and I'm with Drumbeats. Thank you for inviting me to speak here. We organize working class South Asian and Indo-Caribbean people across New York City. I want to hit up maybe 3 or 4 points. First is, why did we choose to endorse Zohran in a campaign like this? We have had an assessment for several years that the centrists are failing. This would be the mainstream of the Democratic Party and even the mainstream of the older Republican Party, which now is fastly disappearing, that operate on a neoliberal model that has led to diminishing wages at a time of record profits for corporations and billionaires, has produced a society where in the most richest country in the world, people are struggling to meet their basic needs. And on top of that, we're seeing this system leading to climate disasters that are growing every year, and to militarism that continues to grow every year while people struggle for basic needs. And so people are disillusioned and in despair with what has been offered. And that is more the reason why the right wing has grown. Less that people are actually becoming right wing, but more so that only the right wing was offering an alternative. It was recognizing that the lives of everyday working people are not good, But instead, it was misdirecting it towards saying, oh, it's the immigrants that are the problem, it's the trans people that are the problem, it's the Muslims, the black people. And what we really need is a actual clear left alternative. And that is what Zohran's campaign presented as an opportunity, a left alternative that is rooted in the material needs of people: rent, housing, transit, childcare, groceries, um, and leading with that message, and then following up with all the other issues that were impacted by, that are particular to our communities as Black people, as queer people, as immigrants. And when Zoran approached us, we took it to our membership, and we went through a process along with Cav Voice and Your Communities for Change, a forum of like 140 people talking in 5, 6 languages to each other, and people unanimously chose to endorse Zoran. And so I think there, like one of the points is just sort of like there was a particularity of what this campaign was offering, a lot of which is something that we can learn from and replicate in many other places. A second thing that I want to highlight is I think if this same campaign had been offered in a context where there was no movement ecosystem, it would not have been as successful. At least for us, this campaign got to build on 25 years of organizing, of base building, of having membership that is deeply rooted in communities, and a history and record of struggles for immigrant rights, for police accountability, for workers' rights, against corporations like Amazon, against militarism, including Zionism. And so not only are our members known in their neighborhoods and in our communities, but we are known for being an organization that fights against all of these issues. Basically, the organization that will fight on things that nobody else will touch or want to fight on. And because of that deep rootedness, our members could just talk to other community members and win them over. And that is only possible because of this history of base building. Just I want to offer in terms of some numbers. We knocked 60,000. No, we did 60,000 phone calls. We did 18,000 door knocks. In terms of like what that yielded, overall, the South Asian Muslim vote increased by 350% compared to the election 4 years ago. South Asians make up 7% of the potential voters, but were 15% of the actual votes in the election. This is a community that has tremendously low voter engagement. And we were just able to like drastically increase it. And then I think the process of also how this is done, all of our communities have the gatekeeper leaders, oftentimes business leaders, oftentimes faith leaders, almost always older men, who basically sell the votes of our communities in exchange for having photographs with the elected official or the candidate, or being able to have a direct line to them. Through our organizing, we just generated so much grassroots energy that we were able to out-organize those gatekeeper leaders. And they either became irrelevant, or they had to then chase us and be like, I want to be down with this campaign, because they didn't want to become irrelevant. And then I think so the last thing I want to offer is this is a moment for bold campaigns. That the trajectory that we've been on with the policies and the types of politics that we've had for the past several decades, leading towards climate disaster, leading towards fascism, leading towards militarism and genocide, is not sustainable. As human beings, even if people are not ideologically in the same camp as us, people know that the current system is not sustainable, and people are looking for alternatives. And it is our responsibilities as movements, as people running campaigns, as candidates, to offer people a vision of the type of society that we want to build. And it has to start from meeting people's material needs, about making their day-to-day lives better, but not just in the incremental sense of like, oh, like you'll get this little incremental change while the world is still continuing to burn. We need to be able to offer something that is concrete, but is also bold and transformative. And that is really what the moment is currently calling for. And now that we have won this election, the task for us in New York City is to really figure out how do we support the process of governance. It is not something that our movements have really had a long history in. How do we support the administration on the inside? How do we interface with them on the outside and keep pressure on them from the outside? And how do we also hold them accountable? And we have to learn how to be able to do all these three things. And in order to do that, we have to get very scientific in our approach. It can't just be about slogans and just only putting out demands. It's understanding if we do this, it has this reaction or this problem that comes as a backlash. How do we respond to that? That is really what governance requires. And that is something that we as our movements are going to have to grow into. It is a tremendous time for us to really get grounded, really get materially based and scientific. And what do we do that is effective and transformative for the type of world that we need? Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Fahad. Really appreciate your insights. Our next speaker is Linda Sarsour, my dear colleague, who serves as the Executive Director of MPower Change Action. Linda is a Palestinian Muslim American born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. She also served as one of the co-founders and national co-chair of Women's March on Washington. With respect to Zohran's race, Linda will talk through what she saw on the ground in terms of community mobilization, successful tactics and strategies employed, and some of the challenges encountered and how they were overcome. I'll turn it over now to Linda.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. I'm so happy to see all my friends here. I'm one of those people that goes and looks in the attendee list to see who's here. We actually got a lot of great people that are here, plus my fellow speakers, people that I've organized with some for many, many years. I go back, I think, with Fahid probably around 20 years now. I don't know, I'm so old, I don't know. It could be around 20 years. Maurice, I met Maurice back in the days when Maurice was the executive director of the New York State Civic Engagement Table, and seeing him leading a national third party, I just feel older every day watching our people move up the ranks. And Jeff, who I've had the honor and privilege of working very closely with in the last year in particular, obviously knowing Jeff's work for a really long time, but being very close to Jeff in the last year, just really feeling honored. I think Fahid really shared a lot of kind of the perspective that I bring to this on the Zohran Mamdani win. I think it was a long time coming. I think communities in New York City, I think all over the country, were waiting for the day when we can get up and actually vote for something for an office of this caliber, right? Because I think we've been able to demonstrate this on a local level. We have incredible city council members in New York City, state legislators who are incredible across our state. But on a citywide level, something like the New York City mayoralship, we never really had an opportunity at the scale to really vote for a vision, to really vote for the things our communities have been fighting for a really long time. And for me, Zohran was a vehicle on a long-standing platform that was built by Black and Brown New Yorkers for decades. This idea of universal childcare, this idea of a better transportation system that speaks to the working class, being able to talk about affordability. This is not something that Zohran created. Zohran was addressing, answering to the frustrations, the concerns, and the calls of communities for a really long time in New York City. And I think what this race did for me, Yasmin, is that it was an opportunity to demonstrate something that we've already been saying for a really long time. share with people a vision, give them something to believe in, right? Inspire them, use joy, don't fear monger, don't tell us that the other side is so much worse than we are, right? We don't want to know who's worse, and we want to know why you're good. Why are you good for the people? And what are you going to do to alleviate harm and suffering? What are you going to do to uplift the movements that have been asking for justice and equity in New York City? And that's what Zohran's campaign did for New Yorkers. It gave them something to believe in. And people oftentimes will say things like, you all are idealistic. You know, they said that about us when we were supporting Bernie Sanders back in the days. They said we were idealistic. And a lot of times people will also say that, well, Zohran is an anomaly. You know, Zohran is just, you know, he's just happens to be a charismatic, you know, young person who knew how to use social media. But we also remember the days of organizing around Bernie Sanders. And I love Bernie. Bernie's not in fact the most charismatic guy that ever walked this earth. But in fact, he also had a vision. He offered something to the people, and the people latched on. I mean, you had someone, you know, in his late 70s with a predominantly young base around him. So again, we reaffirmed what we had already been saying for many years, that it's not about the candidate per se, it is about the platform, it is about the vision that you are offering people. And it's also about who comes in early. You know, oftentimes people might underestimate the power of groups like drum beats, like CAV, like NYCC, like, Muslim Democrats and others that would maybe be seen as a relatively, you know, smaller organizations in comparison to other progressive organizations in New York City. But they demonstrated JVP Action's another one who came in pretty early on. So to see these groups line up on day one, with a candidate that everybody in the beginning was like, are these people out of their minds? Do they think that in New York City that people would elect a brown Muslim immigrant from Queens, like that is pro-Palestinian, pro-boycott, divestment, sanction? These people are just in another universe. And these groups and our Muslim communities, our South Asian communities, our folks, organizers from across the city, they demonstrated what it looks like to believe in something and to be willing to do the work. And what got Zohran into City Hall was a comprehensive field operation across the city, one where people wanted to volunteer. I mean, the volunteers were so enthusiastic that one day my mom, who lives in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, in South Brooklyn, was like, I never in my life opened the door for people that were so excited to be at my door. Like the volunteers were just full of joy and wanted to tell people about this campaign. And oftentimes they started with the platform, not with the candidate. Like, do you care about our neighbors getting universal childcare and fast and free buses? And they're so excited. Everybody had memorized that platform. And even someone like my mom, who's 65 years old, she was excited because they were excited. She was like, yeah, tell me more, even though she already knew why they were there. She said that I wanted to encourage them because they were already so excited to be at the doors. And so my my interpretation of what I saw on the ground is, number one, again, showing what real power looks like when it comes from the bottom up, right? Showing that movements have the capability of electing those who truly align with our values. We also learned that being unequivocally in solidarity with the Palestinian people, being able to look at what's happening in Palestine and calling it a genocide, supporting nonviolent resistance to apartheid in the form of boycott, divestment, sanctions, for example, is in fact not a political liability. It actually sends you to City Hall. And so we're demonstrating, and we hope that candidates across the country who are running for local, state, federal offices in 2026 are looking at what happened in New York City and saying to themselves, I can be courageous. I can truly put forth the values that I believe in. And there will be enough people who will believe in me, who will be inspired by my courage and my moral convictions, that I, in fact, can win office in any part of the country. And we're going to see this in not just places like New York City, but in small towns, like in states like Tennessee. We're going to see this in places like Georgia. We're going to see it in Florida and other places. And so I think the tactics that I really saw that I hope folks kind of observed and want to apply in other parts of the country are: meet people where they're at, talk to people about issues, not personalities and candidates, right? Uh, Come to people with a vision that speaks to their direct needs. come to people with some moral conviction. Like when people believe that you stand for something, it is very inspiring for people to stand with people and vote for people with deep convictions. And so for me, I feel fired up. I feel I'm already on to the next, as they say. I feel like, in New York City, New York City did it, right? And now it's time to say, where are we going in 2026? How do we build on this momentum? And something Fahad and I talked about on another, call is that how do we also use this as an opportunity to grow in our movements, right? Because this is not going to be easy. And there might be things that happen in 2026 where people might be on different sides with different candidates. And that's fine because that's just democracy and that's how things work. But can we stay at least aligned on our values? Can we stay aligned on centering the most marginalized people? Can we make sure that we are prioritizing issues over the candidates that we support, right? That because I think for me, at the end of the day, so as long as a candidate, even if I don't personally support them or whatever, as long as my friends who do support them are helping them grow and be better and stand in their convictions and be good on the issues and center our people, I'm willing to accept whoever wins because that's what democracy is about. Every vote matters, whoever emerges from these races, and I hope that this demonstrates the power that we have. And I'm just very proud, and I'll say this on this call, I'm very proud of our Muslim American communities. And I hope that this encourages them to stand in their power. One of the things we saw in this election, and I'll end with this, I mean, I grew up, my activism came in the aftermath of the horrific attacks of 9/11. And maybe it's because we didn't have social media at that time. While we did see, a rise in hate crimes, while we did see things on the news, we can open primetime television and see people saying anti-Muslim things, but it wasn't as consistent and insistent as what we've seen most recently. And maybe again, it's because we didn't have social media in the first maybe 4 to 5 years in the aftermath of 9/11. But the dramatic increase in anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian sentiment that we saw targeting New York Muslim communities, targeting Zohran, and by extension, our communities, was absolutely outrageous and despicable at every level. It was putting people's lives in danger. They were targeting leaders that were associated with Zohran. They were using Zohran in every single way to try to target our people. And what I appreciate about this moment is that New Yorkers rejected that division and they rejected that hate. And we hope that people do that across the country. And lastly, I hope that even amidst all the anti-Muslim sentiment that we saw in this last election, that our community stays encouraged, that they stay engaged, that they continue to support their local grassroots organizations that are continuing to register people to vote and engage people in the process, that we're not going to be intimidated. We are not going to be silent. We're going to continue to stand in our power. We're going to be unapologetically Muslim American because we have every right to be in this country and we have every right to stand within our values and our principles. And what I will say about our Muslim communities is that if you look across the country and you see where Muslim communities end up landing on many candidates and many campaigns, we are good for our neighbors. We care about immigration and immigrant rights. We care about uplifting the most marginalized people. We tend to support, quote, the right people because we want to be part of a larger ecosystem that centers the people who are the most harmed in our country right now. So I just feel encouraged and inspired, and I look forward to the continued work we'll do together in the next year.
Great. Thank you so much, Linda. Really appreciate it. Our next speaker is Jeff Simpson. Jeff is the campaigns director for Justice Democrats, where their mission is to elect a block of working class leaders in Congress who meet the urgency of our political moment and serve the people's agenda. Jeff is also the PAC director for Justice Democrats and led New Yorkers for Lower Costs, the largest independent expenditure supporting Zohran Mamdani's mayoral campaign in his personal capacity that raised over $4 million from more than 10,000 donors. Jeff wrote a really great op-ed on Zohran's race, specifically highlighting that Zohran's decisive victory was a rebuke of the party's conventional wisdom, that his victory provides a very clear mandate. The left and our progressive allies can and must embrace moral courage as a deliberate political strategy. And he argues that if we do, we won't just move the conversation, but we'll realign political power itself. He'll also discuss some of the work that they were doing and then independent expenditure and the targeting of specifically working class Black and Latino voters and key takeaways on messaging purposes. So I'll turn it over to you, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Yasmin. And really grateful to be here with everyone on this call and on this panel with tremendous leaders. Like Yasmin said, and I'll speak to the Zohran race first before I talk about Justice Democrats in 2026. We started New Yorkers for Lower Costs in January of this year, and that was back when Zohran was maybe a little bit past 1% at that point, but he wasn't much past 4 or 5% when we started it up. And the reason we started it was because we were witnessing the incredible grassroots energy that Fahid at Drumbeats and Maurice at Working Families Party and so many other grassroots organizations were building alongside Zohran. And we knew when campaigns take off in that way, the corporate and special interests are going to come after that candidate. And there needed to be an outside vehicle to support Zohran. And we actually saw on the IE side that same grassroots energy. Yasmin highlighted, we raised $4.5 million from over 20,000 donors. Now, that's not something that usually happens on the independent expenditure side, but it's something that we knew we wanted to lean into because of the incredible energy that Zohran had built. And I want to talk about the moral courage piece because the reason Zohran was able to build that energy is because he had the moral courage to stand up to any corporate and special interest that confronted him. He was unafraid of anyone who threatened him with spending, anyone who got in his way, and he said, I'm going to fight for the people. I'm going to fight for the working class. I'm going to fight for their material needs, and I'm not going to be knocked off of that. And that's the biggest lesson of this race for me, is that that needs to be our strategy, not just on the left, not just as progressives, but that needs to be the strategy of the Democratic Party moving forward. And, I think about this Data for Progress poll. Our friends at Data for Progress did a word cloud. They asked people, what are your impressions of the Democratic Party? And the biggest word in that word cloud for Democrats is weak. That's the word that people think of when they think of the Democratic Party right now. And it's because they back down from the fights. The establishment part of the party backs down from a lot of these major fights, either because they're afraid of losing out on some fundraising, or, AIPAC might spend against us if we say this. And that's been the party's strategy for far, far too long. And that strategy only serves the wealthy, the corporate interests, and Democratic campaign consultants. And it's something that we need to move on from as a movement and as a party. I think the most important thing coming out of this race is all of us realizing that taking on AIPAC, taking on the cryptocurrency lobby, taking on AI, who are putting data centers in many communities across this country, poisoning people, rising energy costs, and taking on fascism and Donald Trump, those are all the same fight. And that's something that Zohran realized. That's something that he embraced. And that's why, even though they outspent us by tens of millions of dollars, we were able to overcome it and win resoundingly. I remember the Ta-Nehisi Coates quote from last year that was, if you can't stand up against a genocide, how can I trust you to stand up for democracy? I think about that all the time. And that needs to be at the core of all of our strategy. That's what Zohran did, and that's the lesson moving forward for us. I'm excited to talk more about 2026 because I think we all realize this in this room. We've had a couple of weeks to celebrate Zohran, but if it's just Zohran who wins, then we as a movement have failed. If it's just his victory in isolation, then we haven't done enough, because now is an opportunity to really realign the party and make it a party that actually stands for working people the way it says it does. And so Justice Democrats, we're recruiting candidates across the country. We're supporting them to build strong campaign infrastructure. And those candidates are people who have moral courage, who are willing to stand up to the bullies and robber barons of our time. And those are candidates who can win. And so we can get into some of the individual races maybe later on in the call. But I'm really excited to build with all of you, that project moving forward of realigning this party. And Zohran's win is really a roadmap to do that. And now we have an opportunity, tremendous opportunity in 2026 to build on it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeff. Really, really appreciate it. So our final speaker before we open it up to Q&A is our dear friend Maurice Mitchell. Maurice is the national director of the Working Families Party. He's a nationally recognized social movement strategist and leader in the movement for Black Lives and a community organizer for racial, social, and economic justice. Born and raised in New York to Caribbean working class parents, Maurice began organizing as a teenager and has held numerous positions with the Long Island Progressive Coalition, Citizen Action of New York State Civic Engagement Table, and ultimately took the helm of the Working Families Party as national director in 2018. Maurice will discuss how coalition building was integral to Zohran's victory and how his victory impacts future races all across the country. And specifically, he'll discuss Working Families Party's primary strategy and how that was integral to ensuring a progressive victory and the defeat of Andrew Cuomo. So I'll turn it over to you now, Maurice.
Thank you, Yasmin. And I just feel a lot of true affection and camaraderie with my fellow panelists, Farhad, Linda, Jeff. And also, I share what I feel like is a through line through everybody's remarks, which is just a lot of optimism for what we as a movement can do, grounded in some, I think, real challenges that we are going to have to confront, but like these are good problems to have, right? Like the challenge of governing the city of New York is a good problem to have. The challenge of translating this pent-up desire for a different politics that working people are feeling, that's a good problem to have. And as an organizer, I rather have that problem than the problem of struggling to communicate to working people that there is a problem. There's a few things I want to create some context. Again, Maurice Mitchell, National Director of the Working Families Party. So I'm going to back up a little bit and talk a little bit about the Working Families Party and how we thought about this race. I'm going to go back to 2021 when there was a mayoral election that led to the election of Eric Adams. I think one of the lessons that we learned is that we as a movement didn't really leverage everything that was available to us in the ranked choice election. And many of the people that shared a lot of our values ran competitively. They ran against each other to kind of be the number one person in the left lane or the progressive lane. And what that ended up doing was splitting our votes. Like when we looked at all of the data, all of the votes for all of the candidates that more or less aligned with our values were enough to overtake Eric Adams. And if we had built a solidarity framework to be able to have a movement that understood that there was more value in showing up together than there was in being competitive, then we would have defeated Eric Adams. And cross endorsement actually worked. We looked at the data. We felt a lot of confidence. And also with that loss and the really, I think, dismal governing experience under Adams, we felt duty bound that in the next opportunity that we, the Working Families Party, were going to do our best to help sort of cohere a strategy that leveraged ranked choice. And so very early on, this was like last year during the summer, Anna Maria Archilla, Jasmine Gripper, who are the co-leads, the co-EDs of the New York Working Families Party, shared with me this slate strategy. And this slate strategy was our best understanding of how we, given our limited resources, our capacity, but the people power of the movement, to leverage that in order to block Eric Adams. And we had a sneaky suspicion that Andrew Cuomo may appear. And the slate strategy basically was around the idea of ranking a slate of a number of candidates, a multiracial slate, candidates that represent different communities, different interests, that will come together, that would campaign together, and that would agree beforehand that to get ranked as a WP candidate and to potentially be ranked number one, you had to agree that you would campaign as a slate and that you would not be competitive with anybody on that slate. And in doing so, they would collectively be able to tell a story about the failed policies of Andrew Cuomo, the failed policies of Eric Adams, and the future policies of a new era in New York. And they collectively would do that. And we're really proud of that work. We think that the cohering of that slate is one of the reasons why we had a moment where Zohran Mamdani and Brad Lander were able to cross-endorse one another. And when you actually look at the tally, you see how many people followed the cross-endorsement and also how many people followed the slate recommendation of the WFP. There's a significant critical mass of people that ranked the slate the way that we said, with Zohran number one all the way down. And it shows the power of us as a movement being able to leverage ranked choice in order to build solidarity and to create a politics that isn't hyper competitive, which is just rare in electoral politics and is like sort of the culture of the first past the post politics that we're used to. So that's number one. And then the other thing I think is, you know, because we've done work over years of creating the conditions where there are progressives, a number of progressives, and a progressive caucus, and a progressive caucus that was instrumental in passing things like the public the public financing regime that is real and very powerful in New York, where there's an 8-to-1 match, which means every dollar of small dollar donors is $8, right? And so that allows for grassroots candidates to compete with corporate candidates, right? And we think that that was a critical piece of the puzzle. If we're talking about how do we replicate this, we need to change the structures of our democracy. We need more places where we're having matching funds, where we're having public financing, where ranked choice during the primary is a reality. We don't so much agree with ranked choice during the general election, but ranked choice during the primary, if leveraged, could create the venue for a sort of solidarity politics. And then, you know, we were able to leverage the fact that we have our own ballot line, and in the state of New York, we are an independent political party. You know, we talked about the corporate capture of the Democratic Party and the reality, the harsh reality that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, even though they're different, and the Republican Party has been captured by a white Christian fascist and white Christian nationalist movement, the Democratic Party, by most people's accounts, right, is has a lot of brand damage, right? It's polling at 18%, 20%. People look at the MAGA movement as at least having a point of view, as being maybe crazy but strong. People look at the Democratic Party as not necessarily having a point of view, being maybe status quo, and being weak. And with those two contrasting point of views for working people, that leads to a lot of cynicism, people dropping out. And so having other vehicles and having other brands that are built by people power and building an independent third force in American politics is, we think, essential for our movement being able to capture all the people who, yes, might agree that the Republican Party are fascist and are racist, but are looking for actual solutions to the problems that they're feeling acutely. And so having our ballot line, what is a way and continues to be a way for us to be able to, in a very concrete way, give people choice and give people options. And, you know, we're very proud of the fact that more people voted for Zohran Mamdani on the New York Working Families ballot line than all the people that voted for Zohran's Republican opponent, Clara Sliwa, which, you know, means that in some ways you can't call us like a third party in New York, right? We've actually like been able to overtake the Republicans, which I think is significant. And so I think some of the lessons that we need to draw from this is that, and I don't want to repeat anything, but Zohran ran his race, right? When people ask me whether or not they should run or how they should run, and you know, the Zohran effect is real. There's a lot of excitement from people, and they're like, "Well, I want to run like Zohran," and I'm like, "Well, running like Zohran means running your race, not Zohran's race," right? Number one, and you know, my experience is that, and I heard this in other people's remarks, but I just think it's true that people don't expect to agree with you on everything, but ultimately people are looking, especially in this moment, for leaders that they believe in. And leaders you believe in have a point of view, have convictions, and may or may not agree with you on a set of things, but deeply believe the things that they believe in. And I think Zohran demonstrated that. The other thing is that poll after poll after poll shows this. Our work in the field shows this. I think our like lived reality shows this, that working people desperately seek relief. You know, people say people call it affordability, but I think it's a crisis of dignity. The fact that you're working harder than ever and that you can't protect yourself, you can't protect your family, you can't put food on the table, and society, but our democracy, the institutions of our country they all seem to be conspiring against you. That's fundamentally a crisis of dignity, and people are looking for leaders that could hear and see the really, I think the like um, overwhelming emotive energy and rejection of the status quo. And Zoran was able to speak to that in a very authentic and passionate way. And that's why he was able to build the coalition that he was able to build. I think the other thing is that, and this is something that we're going to have to build a appetite for, but constantly seeking to be majoritarian, right? So not being satisfied with having the coalition that we have, but always seeking to build new coalition partners, and not being satisfied to simply win with the people that we currently have, but seeking always to reach people, even the people who yesterday might have disagreed with us, finding other opportunities to engage with them so that our movement is irresistible and majoritarian, because we're facing authoritarians, and so we can't simply win. We have to overwhelm them. And there were a lot of wins on Tuesday, but Zoran's win, I think, stood out in terms of the record turnout, in terms of the broadness of the coalition, in terms of, if you listen to strategists in the Democratic Party, they talked about the fact that young men left the Democratic Party, that young people left the Democratic Party, that immigrants left the Democratic Party, and when you look at the crosstabs of who joined Zoran's coalition, well, it seems like if you were serious about those things, you would be interested in figuring out how to learn how to replicate that. But I think the fact that Democrats and Republicans share the same donors in Wall Street, in AI, in crypto, in APAC, in big pharma, in big tech, in the Fraternal Order of the Police, in the real estate lobby, places far too many Democrats in a corporate straitjacket where they can't do the most sensible and the most popular and the most straightforward things, because they're constantly looking over their back for what the crypto lobbyists or AI lobbyists or APAC lobbyists, or again and again and again, may or may not be comfortable with. We need to break that. I think we're at a critical mass where we can, which is why this next uh, upcoming 2026 primary season is so critical, that we go all gas, no brakes. And in state legislatures as well as in Congress, we have the most robust primary season where we could elect people who make commitments not to take APAC money and corporate PAC money. The last thing I'll say about APAC is that the fact that so much money was spent against Zoran in some of the most disgusting Islamophobic and racist attacks, where they attempted to weaponize anti-Semitism and it didn't work, I think is a critical moment in our politics, is a historic moment in our politics, where now there are elected officials who are running for office who see themselves as moderates and centrist, that are making sure that they are demonstrating the contrast between them and their opponents by saying, I don't take APAC money or corporate PAC money. The reason why they're doing that is that is another way of saying I'm a clean politician. I don't think we could ever go back from that. APAC and its concerns have discredited themselves in a way that we're creating a critical mass inside of the Democratic Party, but also, more importantly, in politics in general, because there's even people in the Republican Party that are also distancing themselves from those concerns. That is a good thing for our politics and our democracy. The last thing I'll say is, in order to fully take advantage of 2026 and beyond, we're going to have to think way outside the Democratic Party because of the brand damage, which is why we're building the Working Families Party and why we're going to be leaning in, having conversations with Jeff about the congressional slate of progressives, and having conversations with Farhad and others about, like, what does governing look like, right? New York, there's an opportunity for governing, but also I just want to make people aware that there are mayors in Albany, Syracuse, Buffalo, Dayton, Ohio, Seattle, that are interested in governing in the same image of Zoran, around affordability, focusing like a laser for working people. Chicago, we already have a mayor that is laser focused on that. And the reality of, like, we're going to have to be able to figure out what being in a governing coalition looks like when the mainstream media will waste no time in telling a story about how our governing projects are dead on arrival.
Great. Thank you so much, Maurice. Really, really appreciate all your great work and your insights. So I recognize that we're at 4:48. Apologies. And so we won't have that much time for questions, but there's a couple of questions in the chat. I want to make sure that our panelists have a chance to answer. The first one is a question from Brady. And the question is, does the success of Zohran's campaign have larger national progressive organizations like Working Families and Justice Democrats rethinking their approach to endorsements? More specifically, are they more willing to provide support to progressive candidates early in primary races rather than waiting for them to show a clear, likely path to victory? As someone working on a progressive primary campaign, this shift seems to present a massive opportunity for the movement. So I want to turn it to either Jeff or Maurice if you want to take that question.
Do you want to go, Jeff, or I could go? I mean, I think every election is candidate specific. There's a number of considerations around how WFP gets in or when WFP gets in. So to answer that question fully, would require a lot of nuance. But what I would say is that we're very, very, very bullish about primaries all over the country, state legislature, all the way up to Congress. We support, in general, as many people as possible, challenging as many people as possible, especially corporate Democrats.
Yeah, I would echo that from Maurice. And we've endorsed 4 candidates thus far. I think in total we will probably get to between 10 to 15 endorsements. And some of those folks are people that we recruited in targeted districts where we felt like if we could find a good candidate, there was a strong path to victory. And some of those folks are people who decided to run where we will vet their campaign and vet the district and vet the path to victory. I do think how we use our resources is really important. But that being said, we're at a moment where I think we need to be willing to take on big risks. And we have the wind at our back a little bit with the Zohran win. I think with how Democratic voters are feeling about their own party. And so keep the nominations coming through the Justice Democrats Forum. We are looking at candidates in districts every day. We're connecting with candidates every single day, and we're going to continue to do that. And where we feel like there's good opportunities and ideological alignment, we're going to try to get involved with the resources we have.
Linda, do you want to take that question as well?
I think they did great.
Okay, great. So the next question, Fahad, this would be great if you can answer Christina Brown's question, asking, can you share more about volunteer leadership development that preceded Zohran's campaign, specifically the place-based, deep-rooted leadership development? How were they recruited? How were they trained? Now that the election is over, how will they continue to be in relationship with the folks they mobilized? Would be interested in knowing how accessible and replicable the material process of this ecosystem development is as a person in the Midwest in a red state.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I would say that, a lot of the leadership development that happened before the campaign is, again, what base building organizations and ongoing sustained organizations did. So for us, for Cav Voice, for New York Communities for Change, that was just sort of like the neighborhood-based model where we have members who are developed into leaders. They have relationships in the community, and these are people that are involved in day-to-day fights, either at their workplaces, in their apartment buildings, against corporations that are trying to come into the city or the neighborhood. And so, I think that's one stream that feeds into the river. Then there's also another stream that comes from DSA and their very large number of volunteers and activists who are active members. And then the third stream is the campaign set up a prolific infrastructure, which I think Maurice briefly mentioned, by Tasha, that just sort of like was able to take in not only all these existing people that were like activists and organizers and members of organizations, but also could just take like people that were energized by this campaign, had nothing to do with politics before. And this is where, you know, the more than I don't even know what the final number was, but like 80,000, 90,000 is the last one that I remember, is where they were able to take it. And, you know, I knocked doors with some of them. And some of them were just like, I have nothing to do with politics. You asked them basic questions, they didn't know anything about politics, but they were energized by this campaign. And so the campaign was able to bring them in, you know, do the on-the-spot training before a canvas launch and then send them out. You know, some of them people did 1 or 2 shifts, and then some people like literally became addicted. There's some people I would see several weeks down the line, and they would be like, I just can't stop canvassing. And there's like jokes going around in like WhatsApp groups of people being like, what am I gonna do now that like there's nothing left to like canvas for? And then I think last thing, I want to go back to the first point, which is just like everyday working people. I'm sharing this article. Harper's Bazaar did a piece. You know, Zohran made this reference to the aunties. He specifically talked about Bangladeshi aunties the first time, but then like later like did variations of it. You know, these are a lot of the members of a lot of these base building organizations. These are women that are like home healthcare workers, women that work from home. Um, the women who are not only disregarded in their communities, but are disregarded by their own families, became the leaders of the community in this moment. And I think that's why sort of like emphasizing why ongoing, sustained base building work is important, because that's where we transform people. We bring them into the movement, make them active participants. And then if they're ready and we provide the right support, they can grow into leaders. And some of these same aunties who before would be disregarded or looked down upon by like community leaders, now those same community leaders have to be responsive to them either because they've actually earned their respect or because they know that frankly these aunties are now closer to Zohran and like the campaign than a lot of these old uncle community leaders ever have been or will be. And so that's why like it is important for us to do really sustained and deep ongoing community work. Thank you.
Thank
Can
Go ahead.
can answer my own question because I think this is helpful for just for action items. First of all, thank you everyone for joining us today. 4 o'clock on a Wednesday, and over 240 people at some point were here with us, which is absolutely incredible. I think I wanted just to share a little bit of things that I want people to do. I think people are waiting for like what's next. And I think one of the things that I learned, and I've learned throughout my entire organizing career, is you got to support the people that are on the ground and you got to support them outside of the election cycle. We came out of Zohran. I think people are excited there's a win, but when you're thinking about we're coming up on the end of the year and your end of the year donations, supporting Drum, supporting MPower Change, supporting the Justice Democrats, supporting the Working Families Party, supporting CAB and many of the organizations you heard about here today, particularly for those of you who are, of course, New Yorkers. But for those of you who are not New Yorkers, there is a drumbeat somewhere in your community that is organizing, South Asian workers or organizing Muslim Americans or organizing immigrant communities or organizing a different affinity group. So find those people in your communities and support them. And a lot of these organizations know how to make $1 out of 15 cents. Like their resources stretch really far, and continuing to train leaders and do train the trainer models and continue to have people canvas around issues. One thing that's going to happen in New York, as it will happen in every other city, is that now we have to move on to the issues, right? So we got the candidate in, now the candidate is going to be the mayor. But how do we continue to build a movement outside that helps this mayor-elect achieve his platform, which is absolutely achievable and reasonable here in a place like New York City? And then find a candidate in your community, a local state representative, someone who's running for Congress, and start joining campaigns, start getting ready to knock doors. This is how you win races. It requires a grassroots effort. So there are candidates all across this country, progressives, people of color, women, immigrants, all kinds of amazing people who are ready to take on the fight that we have ahead of us, and they deserve our support. And one thing I'll say, as you're looking for candidates to support across the country, don't ever let anybody tell you that person doesn't have a shot. Because if we listen to everyone that told us that Zohran didn't have a shot in hell to be the mayor of New York City, trust me, none of us on this call would even be anywhere near this campaign. We are often told that we don't have a shot, that the people that we support don't have a shot. And I always say to people, we're the ones that make the shot. Like, we're the ones that get to develop the campaign that takes us to City Hall, that takes us to the state legislator. And you have to believe in our people. Oftentimes, with all the anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant sentiment, anti-Black sentiment, anti-Semitism, all the things we have moving around us, homophobia, etc., we are led to believe that because of that hate, we're not going to win. But we also demonstrated again in New York is that you can get through the hate and actually still win and build a coalition of solidarity. And so donate to organizations, join a political home, find a place to make friends in this very troubled country that we live in. It is great to organize with people who you are aligned with your values. And trust me, it gives you a little hope and optimism in a world that seems to be devoid of those things. And then, like I said, there's a lot of candidates that are looking for volunteers. You saw that, in fact, Fahid, the last number I saw was 104,000 volunteers. Like, it's incredible. And so, not everybody's going to have 104,000 volunteers, but guess what? And all of us know this from working on campaigns. Everybody counts. Every volunteer counts. So don't think because you're not part of a big volunteer operation that somehow that doesn't take you to the finish line. It will. And for us at MPower Change Action, just join our mailing list. We will send you action items. We will get you involved. We did calls to Muslim American voters in the 5 boroughs. Like, we have ways for you to participate, even if it's remote, even if you're supporting someone all the way in Minneapolis, but you live all the way in Georgia. So again, join organizations, be a part, find yourself a political home. I think we all need that more so for our mental health, and just for us to keep going. And like I said, in 2026, I'll say this for my colleagues that are here, we're all going to be unapologetic in the ways in which we show up in 2026 elections and beyond, because our people deserve that. And when we demonstrate that the most marginalized people need to be heard, and need to be centered, and also need to lead, amazing things can happen. So I feel almost overly optimistic. Everyone around me thinks I'm crazy, but I do see some great things happening in 2026.
Thank you so much, Linda. Incredibly helpful and very uplifting. We're at 5 p.m. There's one last question I want us to get to, because this is from a candidate who's on our webinar right now and is a friend to folks on this panel. So Oliver Larkin, who some of you may know, is challenging Representative Moskowitz, based in Florida, South Florida. Moskowitz is, kind of one of the most Islamophobic, I would say, members of Congress we have in the Democratic Party. His question is, what lessons can candidates running on working class issues, Palestine solidarity, and opposing the genocide draw from New York City for races in other parts of the country where AIPAC is deeply entrenched and Democrats are more antagonistic of progressives out of concern for electoral viability?
I'll start really quickly, Yasmin. One of the things that I learned in New York City is that there's 2 narratives that happen. One that the media puts and the powerful people puts out, and the one that's the actual real narrative. So in New York City, as you can imagine, there was a lot of narratives that were trying to pin up Jewish American communities with all other voters, basically, and trying to divide us on an issue, when in fact we agree on pretty much everything else. And so I think one of the things I recommend to candidates is don't fall into that trap, and to continue to kind of go beyond the headlines and build those relationships and have the courageous conversations. Zohran, what is incredible about him is that he always says, I'm willing to sit down with anyone that wants to have a conversation with me. It doesn't mean that I give up my values or the things that I believe, but I'm willing to have those, courageous conversations, especially in places where we vehemently disagree. So have the conversations. Don't shy away from the courageous conversations, but don't allow the headlines to divide you from the voters. In New York City, a significant portion of the volunteer base for Zohran Mamdani were young American Jews in New York City, who saw a vision, who saw solidarity, who saw an opportunity in New York. The second thing that I'll say from the point of on issues is that when I was knocking doors, like you start talking to people about how much childcare costs, especially in a place like New York City, or how much rents are. I don't care who you are. You could be a white 55-year-old guy from Staten Island, which is known to be more conservative, or you can be talking to a young Latina mom in South Brooklyn. People agree on issues of affordability. No, there is no divide between where you are on the political spectrum around this idea that New York is an expensive place to live. Like, there's no one that's like, actually, no, it's not expensive, regardless of what party they're in. So just stick to the message, stick to the issues, and stay optimistic, stay joyful, give something for people to believe in. And for me, I think that is the lessons that I learned from Zohran's campaign. You don't have to go negative. I mean, once in a while, we had to take some jabs at Andrew Cuomo, and of course, Zohran did do that every once in a while, and it was fun. But if you noticed and you watched the videos and you watched the messaging coming out of Zohran's campaign, a lot of it wasn't about the opposition. It was about us. It was about our people. He platformed all people that look from all 5 boroughs. He platformed small businesses. He platformed something to say, look, we could have better days to come if we come together. And so that's my advice to candidates. Just stay positive, stay above the fray of the media, and particularly mainstream media. Continue solidarity work, and when it's time and necessary, have the courageous conversation, because that's the only way we're going to move forward.
Thanks, Linda. Jeff and Maurice, do you want to take that question as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's to me very clear what the opposition is trying to do. When they're successful, they're able to successfully wedge our coalition, and which is why they weaponize anti-Semitism and why they weaponize anti-Blackness and everything else, and where they could grow their movement. It's a two-step, growing their movement and wedging our coalition. We could do the same, and we could do it on our terms. And I think, like, I agree with Linda, as long as we're talking on our terms, we are in a good position to do that. Because most people, understand, and you don't have to like do any deep analysis for people to get that. Yeah, like billionaires and corporations probably should be taxed more so that we could have a dignified life. And that is a populist message that could attract many people across difference. And if we stick to those messages that we know could attract people who might not agree with us on a whole lot of things, but agree with us on that core thing, that's a great contrast, especially if you're running against a corporate Democrat that will never agree to tax corporations, to challenge APAC, to challenge AI, to challenge crypto. But those industries and those oligarchs, there's a lot of people, some of whom don't even identify with politics, that understand that they're nefarious, that they're the reason why their utility prices are going up, that their data centers are taking all of our water, that they're making things unsafe, that they're leading to potentially a bubble that's going to crash our economy. These are broad things that people get, like Linda said, the price of rent, the price of housing, the price of basic goods, the price of groceries, all those things are going up. And corporate Democrats and neoliberal Democrats, and certainly the right wing, they don't have any solutions to those things. We do. And that's our superpower, and we should just lean into it.
And I'll just go quick. I agree with what Maurice and Linda both said, and I'll just add, just as someone who works directly with candidates a lot, to embrace the grind of it all and to be able to power through that part of it. And I know you're working really hard down in Florida, Oliver, and just to keep it up. Like, Zohran wasn't at that peak moment of momentum the whole race, right? Like, some of it was just the grinding out the small dollar donations, building up that volunteer base. It happens little by little. It doesn't always happen all at once. And, if you are able to push and have that major moment and people are paying attention, like, that's the moment that you're building for. And, just be thinking about that when the days are hard and the days are long, because it's not easy being a candidate, y'all. They really put a lot out there. It's a really vulnerable position to be in, and have a lot of respect for anyone willing to do it, particularly the people who are willing to do it in a morally courageous way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeff. And thank you to Oliver for the question. We really apologize. There's a ton more questions we didn't get to, but we do want to let you know that I know several have asked this. We will share the recording with all the attendees and also anyone else that RCP that wasn't able to make the Zoom, and then we'll circle back with our panelists to see if they have any additional after action items for folks that would be helpful to take to ensure that we build the bench, we build political power in our communities, and really capitalize on this moment. Thank you so much to Maurice, Jeff, Fahad, Linda, incredible panel. Thank you to all of you for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.